My brother laughed when he realized my name wasn't on the invitation list for our parents' anniversary dinner. It wasn't a loud laugh. That would have been too obvious. It was the kind of smug, controlled smirk people use when they think they've already won and don't need to try anymore. We were sitting in my parents' living room, the same room where every major family announcement had always been made, engagements, promotions, inheritances, even apologies that never really felt sincere. My mother was holding her phone, scrolling through a beautifully designed digital invitation. Gold trim, elegant fonts, a luxury venue name at the bottom. Everyone else had received it already. I hadn't. My brother leaned back on the sofa, crossed his arms, and said, "Oh, you didn't get it?" His tone was fake concerned, almost theatrical. Must have been a mistake. Then he looked at my mother. Or maybe it wasn't. No one corrected him. That silence told me everything. My parents' 50th anniversary was supposed to be a big deal. Half a century together. They had decided to make it a grand evening, close relatives, old friends, business connections, the kind of event where appearances mattered more than honesty. And apparently, my presence didn't fit the image they wanted to project. My mother finally looked up from her phone. "We assumed you'd be busy," she said lightly, like she was explaining a weather change. "You're always working, and the venue has limited seating." Limited seating. For a hall that could hold 300 people. My brother didn't even bother hiding his satisfaction anymore. "It's fine," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "Not everything has to include everyone. Some people just don't belong at certain tables." That sentence landed exactly the way he wanted it to. I nodded. Slowly. Calmly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. Years ago, I had learned that reacting emotionally only gave them what they wanted. Instead, I smiled and said, "You're right. Enjoy the dinner." That smile confused them more than anger ever could. Because what they didn't know, what none of them bothered to ask, was why I'd been so busy lately, or what kind of work had been keeping me away from family gatherings. They still saw me as the quiet one. The practical one. The sibling who never bragged, never posted achievements online, never needed validation. In their minds, success only counted if it was visible. The dinner was scheduled for the following Saturday at a high-end venue downtown, a restored historic property that doubled as an event space. I knew the place well. Not because I'd attended events there, but because I'd reviewed its financials 2 years earlier during an acquisition assessment. Back then, I hadn't moved forward. The numbers hadn't aligned. Or rather, they hadn't aligned yet. That night, after leaving my parents' house, I sat in my car for a long time before driving away. I didn't feel angry. I felt focused. The kind of clarity that comes when something finally clicks into place. I made one call. Then another. By Tuesday, paperwork was moving. By Thursday, contracts were being finalized. Quietly. Efficiently. No drama. No announcements. The kind of transactions that happen behind the scenes while everyone else is busy polishing speeches and choosing outfits. Saturday arrived faster than anyone expected. The anniversary dinner was set to begin at 7. Guests started arriving around 6:30, dressed in formal wear, posing for photos at the entrance, congratulating my parents on 50 years together. My brother was already there, acting like a host, greeting people as if the event were his own accomplishment. He wore confidence like a tailored jacket, comfortable, familiar, and completely unearned. At 6:45, I arrived. Not at their venue. At the building next door. Same architecture. Same era. Same prestige. But unlike the place my parents had rented for a night, this one belonged to me. Fully. Legally. Permanently. The sign outside still bore the old name, but inside, everything had been transformed. Lighting adjusted. Music ready. Tables set. Staff briefed. Invitations, real ones, had been sent days earlier. Not to everyone. Only to the relatives and friends who hadn't made the main list. The ones quietly excluded. The cousins who were too casual. The uncles who weren't presentable enough. The family members who had slowly been pushed to the edges over the years. They came because they were surprised. Curious. And, most of all, because someone had finally invited them. At 7:10, something interesting started happening next door. Guests began excusing themselves. At first, it was subtle. A couple here. A pair there. People claiming they needed air, or wanted to say hello to someone they'd just recognized through the glass. My brother noticed it immediately. He kept glancing toward the entrance, checking his watch, forcing smiles while trying to understand why the room felt emptier by the minute. By 7:30, it was impossible to ignore. More than a third of the guests were gone. My parents were confused. My mother whispered urgently to the event coordinator. My father stood frozen near the head table, anniversary speech clutched in his hand, eyes darting around the room. Then someone said it. There's another party next door. My brother frowned. Another party? He scoffed. Who would schedule something like that on the same night? The answer was walking toward the shared courtyard between the two buildings. Me. I didn't enter their venue. I didn't interrupt. I didn't make a scene. I simply stood where I could be seen through the glass, speaking calmly with relatives, laughing softly, completely unbothered. That was when my brother's smirk disappeared. He recognized the look on my face. Not anger. Not revenge. Control. And for the first time that night, he realized something was very, very wrong. The moment my brother locked eyes with me through the glass, I saw the calculation start behind his expression. He wasn't panicking yet, that would come later. Right now, he was trying to understand the situation, trying to fit what he was seeing into the version of reality he'd always believed in, the one where I was background noise, not a variable that could disrupt anything important. He straightened his jacket, forced a smile back onto his face, and leaned toward my parents, whispering something urgently. My mother followed his gaze, her confusion hardening into disbelief as she spotted me standing next door, relaxed, composed, completely at ease in a room that was filling faster than hers was emptying. Within minutes, phones were out. Guests were texting people inside my space, asking questions. How do you know about this? Who organized it? Why is it better? Because it was better. The lighting was warmer. The music wasn't stiff background noise but something that made people linger. The staff wasn't rushing guests through a pre-planned schedule, they were attentive, fluid, responsive. And most importantly, the people inside didn't feel judged for being there. They felt welcomed. I didn't make a speech. I didn't need to. My presence alone was enough to shift the gravity of the night. At 7:45, my brother crossed the courtyard. He didn't storm over. That would have drawn attention. Instead, he walked briskly, jaw tight, eyes scanning the room as if looking for hidden cameras. When he reached me, he lowered his voice. "What is this?" he asked, teeth clenched, pretending to smile for anyone watching. "What do you think you're doing?" "I'm hosting," I replied calmly. "Didn't you get the invite?" His eyes flicked toward the guests behind me. Our cousins laughing, an aunt he hadn't spoken to in years raising a glass, a former family friend chatting comfortably with people she'd been excluded from before. "You're embarrassing them," he hissed. "No," I said, "I'm not. I wasn't invited to embarrass them. I was excluded. There's a difference." He scoffed quietly. "You don't even belong here. This is petty." I tilted my head slightly. "Petty would have been crashing your dinner. I didn't. I chose my own table." That was when my mother appeared behind him. Her face was pale, carefully composed in the way she'd mastered over decades of social maneuvering. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, not angrily, but with something closer to panic. "People are leaving. This night is supposed to be about us." And this night is about family, I replied. The ones who weren't deemed important enough. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, there was no rehearsed line ready to go. My father didn't come over. He stayed inside, glued to his seat, staring at the thinning crowd, his anniversary speech now meaningless. He understood what was happening. He just didn't know how to stop it. By 8 o'clock, more than half the guests from their event had migrated. Some stayed polite and split their time. Others didn't go back at all. The staff at my parents' venue looked increasingly idle, glancing at one another as courses were delayed, tables half empty. That's when the venue manager from next door approached me quietly. "Everything's ready," he said. "Whenever you'd like." I nodded. "Thank you." I stepped onto the small raised platform, not a stage, just enough elevation to be seen. The room naturally quieted. Conversations softened. Glasses lowered. "I won't keep this long," I said evenly. "I just want to thank everyone for coming. Not because this is a grand event, but because you showed up for each other. That matters." I paused, letting the silence work. This wasn't planned as a protest or a statement. It was planned as an alternative. Because sometimes, when you're told you don't belong somewhere, the right response isn't to argue, it's to build something better. No applause. Not yet. Just understanding. "And one more thing," I added. "If anyone is wondering why this space was available on such short notice, it's because it's no longer a venue for rent." A few brows furrowed. "I purchased the property last month." That did it. The murmurs turned into sharp inhales, exchanged looks, whispered confirmations. My brother's face drained of color. My mother froze mid-step. Someone near the back let out a soft, stunned laugh. "You, what?" my brother said under his breath. "I own this building," I repeated calmly. "And the one next to it." That was the moment control shifted completely. My father finally stood up. He walked over slowly, dignity cracking with every step, until he was standing across from me in the courtyard, the weight of 50 years of authority suddenly irrelevant. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked. I met his eyes. "You didn't ask." Silence. He looked around at the people who had chosen my space over his celebration. Not out of spite, but because it felt better to be there. "This wasn't necessary," he said weakly. "It wasn't necessary to exclude me either," I replied. But here we are. By 8:30, their event was effectively over. The caterers wrapped up early. The photographer packed away equipment unused. Guests stopped pretending they were coming back. Inside my space, the night was just beginning. My brother didn't speak to me again. He left shortly after, phone pressed to his ear, voice tight with frustration. My parents stayed until the end, sitting quietly at a corner table, no longer the center of attention they'd planned to be. For once, they were just guests. When the night finally wound down, people thanked me, not for the venue, not for the food, but for how the evening felt. Inclusive. Warm. Honest. As the last guests left and the staff began cleaning up, my mother approached me one final time. "I didn't think you were capable of this," she said softly. "I know," I replied. That was the problem. I watched her walk away, shoulders heavy, the illusion she'd built for decades finally cracked. The building went quiet. I stood alone for a moment, breathing in the stillness. I hadn't taken revenge. I'd simply stopped asking for permission. The next morning didn't come with fireworks or dramatic phone calls. It came quietly, which somehow felt heavier. My phone stayed face down on the kitchen counter while sunlight crept across the floor of my apartment. I knew messages would come. I also knew I wouldn't answer them immediately. Power doesn't announce itself loudly after it's established. It waits. By noon, the first call came from my father. I let it ring. Then my mother texted, "We need to talk." This went too far. Too far. That phrase always appeared when the balance shifted. When control slipped out of hands that were used to holding it. I didn't reply. Instead, I drove to the office. Not their office. Mine. The building I'd purchased months earlier wasn't just an investment or a dramatic reveal. It was the operational hub for something I'd been building quietly for years. Consulting contracts, equity positions, silent partnerships with people my family never thought mattered because they didn't attend the right dinners or smile at the right people. When I walked in, the receptionist greeted me by name. No hesitation. No surprise. Just respect. "Your 10 o'clock is ready," she said. I nodded and stepped into the conference room. Around the table sat 3 people my brother had once dismissed as irrelevant connections. A supplier he'd burned. A developer my father had laughed out of a deal. A legal advisor my mother thought was too small time. Together, they now represented leverage. We reviewed numbers calmly. Strategically. Methodically. By the time the meeting ended, 2 things were set in motion. First, the venue my parents had used for decades, the one they believed defined their social standing, would not be renewing its partnership with them. The contract was clean. The exit was legal. The reason was simple. Misalignment of values. Second, a restructuring proposal would be delivered to my brother's company by the end of the week. Not an attack. Just an offer. One he couldn't afford to refuse without consequences. I didn't engineer chaos. I engineered inevitability. That evening, I finally returned my father's call. He didn't yell. He didn't lecture. He sounded tired. "I didn't recognize you last night," he said. "I've been the same person for years," I replied. "You just never looked closely." Silence. "You humiliated us," my mother said in the background, clearly on speaker. "No," I corrected. "You humiliated yourselves by assuming I needed your approval to matter." My brother cut in sharply. "You planned this. You waited." "Yes," I said honestly. Because reacting would have made me look small. Preparing made me unstoppable. He laughed bitterly. "So what now? You walk away feeling superior?" "No," I said. "Now I move forward. Whether you're in my life or not depends on how you behave next." Another pause. That was the moment they understood this wasn't a phase, or anger, or rebellion. This was a boundary. Over the next 2 weeks, everything realigned. Invitations stopped coming, then started again, different ones, from people who hadn't known my family at all. My brother's company announced strategic delays. My parents' social calendar thinned noticeably. Not because I sabotaged it. But because influence follows momentum, not nostalgia. One afternoon, my mother showed up unannounced. She looked smaller without an audience. "I didn't think excluding you would matter," she admitted quietly. "We thought you'd accept it. Like always." I leaned against the doorframe. "That was your mistake. You confused silence with consent." She nodded slowly. "Can we fix this?" I considered the question carefully. "Not by pretending nothing happened," I said. "Only by accepting that I no longer sit at the kids' table." She left without arguing. My brother never apologized. He didn't need to. His distance was apology enough. Months later, I attended another family gathering. Not theirs. Mine. Different location. Different people. Some familiar faces who had chosen respect over hierarchy. Others completely new. No one questioned why I was there. No one decided whether I belonged. Because I did. And I always had. The night ended quietly. No speeches, no dramatic exits. Just laughter, conversation, ease. The kind of environment you build when you stop shrinking yourself to fit rooms you didn't design. As the last guest left, I stood by the window and looked out at the city lights. Being excluded had never been the wound. Believing I deserved it was. And that belief was finally gone.